two teenagers spent 5 months hunting strangers at night, beating them to death with hammers, and filming their mutilated bodies. Artyom Anufriev and Nikita Litkin were from Akademgorodok, a neighborhood in Irkutsk, Russia, and honestly, the two of them were already deeply troubled long before anyone knew what they were capable of. Artyom was angry, openly hateful, and became involved with neo-Nazi and extremist groups. Nikita was much quieter. He was isolated, struggled socially, and became extremely dependent on Artyom. The two basically fed into each other's worst qualities. And then there was their obsession with serial killers. They were fascinated by people like Alexander Pichushkin and the Dnei Propetras maniacs. But they didn't just want to understand these killers. They wanted to be remembered like them. They wanted infamy. So in late 2010, they started hunting people around their own neighborhood. They would wait until it was dark, follow people walking alone, and come up behind them without a warning. Their victims included elderly people, homeless people, and even a 12-year-old boy. They used hammers, mallets, bats, knives, whatever they had, and they didn't simply attack their victims. They kept going, sometimes repeatedly striking their heads and faces, even after the person was already down. And then they did something that makes this case even harder to stomach. They filmed it. They recorded the aftermath of their attacks, and even filmed themselves mutilating one of their victims. But eventually, that camera became their biggest mistake. Nikita's uncle borrowed the camera and found footage that made it immediately clear that something was terribly wrong. The two had apparently forgotten to delete their crimes. So instead of keeping this horrifying information to himself, his uncle took the camera straight to the police, and that evidence led investigators directly to the two teenagers, which is especially disturbing considering the investigation itself had already been struggling. Some of the earlier attacks were treated as isolated incidents, and investigators initially failed to recognize that a serial killer, or rather two, were operating in the neighborhood. Their own mistakes ended up doing what the investigation hadn't. They exposed them. On April 5th, 2011, Artyom was sentenced to life in prison, while Nikita, who was a minor at the time of the crimes, was sentenced to 24 years, which was later reduced to 20. But Nikita never served the entire sentence. On November 30th, 2021, while in prison, he took his own life. But unfortunately, the story didn't end with their arrest. For months, people in the community were terrified to walk alone after dark. Families worried about their children. Residents changed their routines, and a place that once felt ordinary was now associated with fear. It also sparked conversations about online extremists and how isolation can lead young people towards violence. I know that this case today was extremely heavy and terrifying, so I'm going to go ahead and give you a hug. Bring it in. With that being